We can be honest, if Gojo entered the Culling games, there would be no Culling games. He would absolutely sweep, it would not be close. He would speedrun the competition like a groomer speedruns Minecraft. Not a single competitor would give him trouble, or would they? There are some pretty strong sorcerers in the Culling games, including a former strongest sorcerer and a couple that can bypass infinity. Today, I want to see which Culling games player would give Gojo the most trouble. And at the end, if none of them can put Gojo in any trouble, I want to see if all of them together can. First up, let's talk about Higuruma. Higuruma is one of the sorcerers that would give Gojo the most trouble in the Culling games. That's not to say he would give Gojo much trouble, but he is one of the few sorcerers that has a way through infinity. This is of course via his domain Deadly Sentencing, which can remove the curse techniques of Higuruma's opponents if they are found guilty by Judgment. Considering Higuruma's capabilities as a sorcerer are only second to his capabilities as a lawyer, I don't think it's unlikely that Gojo loses the Limitless technique for a crime he has committed, which would mean infinity would be disabled. This means Higuruma just has to beat Gojo with his cursed energy alone. You know, the thing Jogo, Hanami, and Chozo failed to do because Gojo is just too good at everything he does. If we're being honest, it's probable that Higuruma doesn't even get as far as removing the Limitless technique, as Gojo might just be able to open his domain inside Higuruma's domain and fry his brain before clapping his cheeks harder than he used to clap Geto's. The reason I say it's probable and not guaranteed is because Higuruma's domain forbids violence. This could be interpreted as meaning the domain can prevent the opening of lethal domains, as their purpose is to purely cause violence. I really don't know if Higuruma's domain would apply like this, but ultimately it probably doesn't matter unless Higuruma can get a death penalty off, which seems really unlikely. As far as we know, the death penalty verdict is only handed out for crimes considered a death penalty under Japanese law. At the time of the Culling games, the only crime that we know Gojo committed that could potentially fall into this category is killing Toji. Normally, I think self-defense is a valid reason for killing someone under Japanese law, but is it self-defense if you seek out the person who tried to kill you for revenge? Or is that just vigilante justice? And how does Jujutsu play into this situation? I have no clue. I didn't finish college, let alone law school. There is a world where Judgment brings up Gojo killing Toji as a crime, but I find it unlikely that Higuruma could get a guilty verdict on this considering what Toji did prior to this and considering Toji's line of work in general. Even if Higuruma does get the Executioner's sword, he still might not win considering he couldn't land a hit on Sukuna with it, and Sukuna is generally worse at hand-to-hand combat than Gojo. Overall, I don't think Higuruma would stand much of a chance. It would basically take Gojo tripping into the Executioner's sword for him to win, and even getting the sword in the first place is about as likely as my viewers being in a relationship. Not likely. The next notable sorcerer of the Culling games is Reggie, and if we're being honest, this is an even worse case than Higuruma. Reggie might be an experienced sorcerer, but in this battle, he's only getting more experience at losing. He just has no way to get through infinity. Really, the only possible loophole is if he can command his summoned objects to go through infinity, as they are supposed to be able to follow directions and they can do things the objects normally can't do, such as being able to fly through the air. This seems like a huge stretch of this aspect of contractual recreation, and I do not think it's likely, because if this is how it works, then he could go around telling everything he recreates to home onto his opponents and kill them instantly, or something similar. So with no way to get through infinity, Reggie just has no way to stand up to Gojo at all, barring that he secretly has like a nuclear bomb or something. Also, in case it wasn't clear, no one else in Reggie's squad has the potential to beat Gojo either, and I don't think I have to explain why. So instead, let's move to another contender that might actually be able to do a bit to Gojo: Kashimo. Kashimo was the strongest sorcerer in the Edo period and potentially the strongest individual player in the Culling games that we saw. He mostly makes use of lightning-based abilities and has cursed energy that is electrified, meaning it stuns opponents if they come in contact with him. He also has a curse technique that allows him to make use of every aspect of electricity, but he can only use it one time and then he basically dies. What's interesting about Kashimo is some people theorize he might be able to get through infinity because of how lightning works. Lightning in general takes the path of least resistance from its origin point to its destination. Obviously this doesn't take Jujutsu into account because we don't have Jujutsu in the real world, thank God. Could you imagine strolling through a city and some kid blows up a building to kill something that you can't see? Terrifying. Anyway, if we follow this logic for lightning, it could potentially get through infinity if its destination is Gojo. All it has to do is find the path of least resistance through infinity. This is a stretch by a lot, but it doesn't stop there. The other way he has to bypass infinity is via his curse technique Mystic Beast Amber. When this technique is active, Kashimo gains complete and utter control over electricity. This includes electromagnetic waves, which are subatomic. Infinity functions on an atomic level, as the entirety of the Limitless technique is focused on controlling cursed energy at an atomic level, meaning electromagnetic waves could potentially phase through infinity. I don't don't know exactly how this would work because I barely passed physics, let alone quantum physics, but it does mean that Kashimo has a way through infinity that he'd probably never use. Yeah, it's made pretty clear in his fight with Hikari that even if Kashimo is on the brink of death, he won't use his technique because he's saving it for Sukuna. This means, realistically, he would never use electromagnetic waves to get through infinity. But what if he did? Would he have a chance? Well, it's complicated. See, electromagnetic waves are just any waves that do not need a medium to travel through. So electrical waves, magnetic waves, and waves of radiation all fall under this category. This means Kashimo's control could be as great as shooting gamma radiation straight into Gojo, which would do irreparable damage to him, or it could just be using magnetic waves to pull Gojo's car keys out of his pocket. In general, electromagnetic waves seem to be less dangerous to humans than more, so I don't think it would give him a big enough advantage to win. Plus, even if he does land some waves on Gojo, Gojo would probably be able to tell, and then understanding he's facing a serious threat, he would just open his domain, melting Kashimo's brain, ending Mystic Beast Amber, and killing him right there. Next, we have the Sendai Colony, where Ryu, Uro, and Kurouchi would all oppose Gojo. There is also Daruv, but I'm not going to include him because we just don't know enough about his ability to accurately consider it as a factor. Despite being the strongest colony we saw, Sendai is actually the least threatening to Gojo. None of Ryu, Uro, or Kurouchi have a way to get through infinity besides their domain, and as clearly stated in the series, Gojo's domain is more refined than almost anyone's, so it's not like they could actually sustain their domains if he opens his. This does lead to an interesting possibility though. If only one person opens their domain with Gojo in it, the other two can fight Gojo while he's in Curse Technique Burnout, allowing them to actually have a chance at hitting Gojo in the first place. If this does happen, does any combination of the three have a chance at success? Still, no. If Kenjaku can fend off both Yuki and Chozo while in Curse Technique Burnout, Gojo should have no problem defending himself against any combination of these three, considering he is stronger than Kenjaku, and none of these sorcerers in Sendai are stronger than Yuki. I think the individual that would give Gojo the most trouble while he's in Burnout would be Kurouchi, as his Curse tool can do major damage even to special grades with just one hit, and his swarms of bugs can disrupt the perception of the Six Eyes, similar to what Toji did with the Flyheads. But even then, Gojo can still dogwalk him like he's, well, a dog, and I don't think Uro or Ryu fare anywhere close to as good. I mean, we saw Ryu get curb stomped by 15-finger Sukuna, so I don't think we really need to explain why Gojo is stronger there. As for Uro, I just don't think she has the offensive output to beat Gojo before his Curse Technique restores. She has an ability that would be trouble if he tried to use blue, red, or even purple, since it can redirect those, but if he fights her with just infinity, she really has no way to counter it. The final individual character worth talking about is Curse Noya, and honestly, Curse Noya might be the Culling Games character that gives Gojo the most trouble. This is because of his domain, Time Cell Moon Palace. Time Cell Moon Palace is completely broken. It essentially pushes the projection sorcery technique to the absolute furthest it can go. These cells will float around the opponent's body and do internal damage, causing cells to move out of sync, damaging organs and the body in general. What's worse is that when opponents try to move, they risk severing limbs because the frames of animation do not move with the rest of the body. This means if Curse Noya opens his domain before Gojo, he could prevent Gojo from doing the hand signs needed to open a counter domain, as the movement could lead to the severing of Gojo's fingers, which could give Noya a chance to actually damage Gojo. Now, we do know Gojo can regrow limbs, so if he regrows his fingers in the position of a domain expansion, he should be able to open his domain and just win. But the domain could also theoretically cause hemorrhaging of the brain if animation cells get up there, which could prevent the use of Jujutsu in general if it hurts that part of the brain, or it could just kill Gojo outright if it damages an important part. But again, that is just theoretical. We didn't see this happen with Katana or Sumo, so this might not even be possible. Plus, if we want to talk about theoreticals, we also have to mention that Reverse Curse Technique could be a good counter for this domain as well, as it should dispel the cursed energy in one's body during the healing process, eliminating the animation cells. But we also didn't see that happen, so it's hard to say for sure. This is of course all on the assumption that Gojo doesn't open his domain before Noya, or that his domain isn't faster than Noya's, which is a pretty monumental assumption. The unfortunate truth is, this entire video has been extremely generous towards the Culling Games players. Even if we completely disregard Infinity, Gojo is still the best hand-to-hand fighter in the entire series, and it's not really close. Not even Sukuna could keep up with him in hand-to-hand combat, and even Gege has stated that he is the best in the series along with Kenjaku. This means even without his technique, he could still probably overwhelm everyone in the Culling Games, at least individually. But what if all 7 sorcerers we talked about teamed up? Would they have a chance? I believe there are some paths to victory for these 7, but they're slimmer than a strand of banana DNA. There are 2 main paths I can see them potentially maybe winning on. The first is if Hige Higuruma removes Infinity as we stated earlier. This would let the other 6 Culling Games players actually fight Gojo and maybe do damage to him, and from here there are a lot of potential routes that Gojo could be defeated on. Without Infinity, Gojo has no way to easily survive Kashimo's lightning, as it can easily rend flesh regardless of cursed energy output. But even if Gojo focuses on Kashimo and beats him within an inch of his life, the other 6 still have a couple of ways that could beat him, such as using Kuroroshi's cockroaches to obscure the 6 eyes and lay into Gojo with full power granite blasts. This still might not be enough to kill him, and it isn't as guaranteed as Kashimo, but if Kashimo is out of the question, this is probably their best shot. Basically, for these guys to win, they need to rely on Kashimo in the way the protagonists relied on Gojo, except Kashimo is actually substantially weaker than Gojo, which wasn't the case for him in Sukuna. Victory would be much more likely if Kashimo decided to use his curse technique, but as we've well established, that's unlikely. Another possibility is what we talked about in Sendai, where they sacrifice someone in a domain to force Gojo into burnout and then jump him. This is basically just a worse version of the Higuruma strat, but it does prevent deadly sentencing from being countered for a little bit, which is decent, as Higuruma could prove valuable just by learning from observing Gojo. I mean, we saw how quickly he learned domain amplification, so it might actually be better for him to sit back for a while and just watch Gojo for analysis before hopping in. Even though this would help out a bit, I doubt it would be enough to realistically turn the tables in any meaningful way. The other issue with the curse technique burnout strategy is that they just have so little time to actually attack Gojo before he recovers his technique, and that's assuming he doesn't use reverse curse technique to restore his curse technique early. Both of these strategies also fail if Gojo opens his domain to a full 200-meter radius, as no one here is able to escape that radius faster than Gojo can open his domain, meaning they would all get caught in it, and we all know what happens from there. And as if that wasn't enough, all of these strategies are also unlikely because they require all of these sorcerers to plan in the way the protagonists plan for Sukuna, which is just not realistic considering they are spread far across Japan and they don't have the month of time the protagonists had. Plus, they're all competitors in the same game, so if they ever met face to face, they would probably prefer to kill each other rather than team up to beat one strong sorcerer. So overall, I would have to say the answer is no. They don't really stand a chance to Gojo in any way, shape, or form. There is a reason Kenjaku barred players from entering the Culling Games right before he got unsealed, and it's because he would have just ruined the entire point of the Culling Games by dominating everyone in every way. Anyway, that's all I've got on this subject. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you this week for another video.